Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Zach Pasquarello, and I am making another one of my weekly updates on my box truck business. I appreciate you all following along on my journey here. If you guys like the video, um, go ahead and throw a like on the video. If you have any questions, feel free to comment on the video. And if you want to see more of these videos, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I appreciate you all watching. And I say this a lot of times, but the main reason why I like to create these videos is just to share my experience. And the main theme of this particular video is mistakes that I made, and I want to share it with you all. That way, hopefully, you do not make the same mistakes I did, because going into business is difficult, challenging. There's a lot of unknowns. It's going to cost you a lot of money, as you can see here. Cost me almost $18,000 whenever I started this business back in April. I made a lot of mistakes, and luckily I've learned from those mistakes. And luckily, now that you're watching this video, hopefully you will not make the same mistakes that I did. So I'm going to jump right into it. And also keep in mind, my methods and the things that I've learned, certainly not end all be all. It's just something that's happened to me from my personal experience. So your experience might be different from mine. If you've had different experiences, I'd love to hear about it. Go ahead and leave a comment. If you disagree with something I'm saying, if you agree with something I'm saying, let's share with the other people who are thinking about starting a box truck business. So let's jump right into it. I usually share my QuickBooks, but I'm not going to share my QuickBooks today. I shared a pretty cool update in October and kind of showed you the whole month. And so I'm not going to share my QuickBooks, but I am going to share 5 mistakes that I made when starting my box truck business. That way you all do not make the same mistake that I did. So we'll just jump right into it here. The big recommendation I have is to do a lot of research. And I did a lot of research when I first started. Obviously, it was not enough research. I still made these mistakes. But if you do a lot of research, at least to protect yourself from making a few of the mistakes. So do as much research as you can. But don't do so much research that 2 years go by and you don't end up even starting the business. So do a little bit of research, but also you're going to make mistakes. You're going to learn from those mistakes. So do your research before you start, but then, don't hesitate too much. Don't wait too long to get into it, because, you're going to live, you're going to learn, you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to do some things right, but you're never going to know, what works and what doesn't until you actually start a box truck business. So I would, recommend doing your research, but definitely, don't wait too long to get into the box truck business. So I talk about it all the time, and probably, it's not the worst thing that's happened in my business, but it's super important. Factoring companies versus quick pay versus just relying on net 30, net 60 to get paid by the brokers. So as a carrier, shippers, obviously that's the warehouse, and then we are the carrier. So we work with the shippers to move their products from one warehouse to another warehouse. But the shippers rely on what's called a broker to basically, find a carrier like us to move their product for them. So the shippers are not going to be reaching out to you directly. It's going to be the brokers. You're going to be working with the brokers. So the shipper pays the broker pays you. Or in this case, the broker pays the factoring company, and then the factoring company pays you. So there's a lot of hands that touch the money from the shipper until it finally gets to the carrier. But just do your research before you start with a factoring company. The big thing that I did not realize when I started was that once you sign up with certain factoring companies, they own all of your accounts receivable. So in my situation, I wanted to quick pay with some of the brokers, and I couldn't because they asked for a notice of release from TAF saying that, hey, this person, this carrier is no longer with this factoring company. So a couple brokers that I tried to work with, they wouldn't even pay me directly because TAF technically owns all of my accounts receivables. So just keep that in mind. Factoring companies typically charge 3%, and then brokers typically offer quick pay, and they'll take out 3%. So you end up making the same amount of money at the end of the day. But the other thing I didn't know is that not all brokers have enough credit with the factoring companies to be factored. So perfect example, Hurricane Logistics, hate to throw them underneath the bus, but if you've been in the business for a while now, you know that they don't have any credit with probably any factoring companies at this point because they have a lot of outstanding accounts receivable, accounts payable. And so I ran a few loads for Hurricane Logistics, and TAFs would not factor them. I even tried to do quick pay with them, and they wouldn't do quick pay unless I submitted a notice of release from my factoring company. So I had to wait 30 days. It was actually 65 days until they finally paid TAFs, and then TAFs turned around and paid me. So do your research on the factoring companies. I've heard OTR is decent, RTS, Triumph. I don't know much about Triumph, but that's just another factoring company. The one factoring company that I have heard a lot of good things about is called Bobtail. And I've never worked with them personally, but I heard that they don't require you to factor every load. I don't know if that's true, but look into Bobtail. I've heard they're pretty good. So that's enough about factoring companies. I talk about it probably every single week in my videos, but we can move on from the factoring companies. Okay, so choosing a driver. So there's a couple different ways to go about this business. You can be an owner-operator, which you will make significantly more money, or you can just be an owner. So if you guys have been following along on my channel for a little while, you know that I am just an owner. I am not an owner-operator. So what that means is I do not drive the truck. So I just own the box truck business, and I hire drivers to drive my trucks. So obviously my expenses are significantly higher because I have to pay for a driver. But the intent is that I can get 2 or 3 more trucks, 4 or 5 more trucks, up to 10 trucks, and my responsibilities don't increase a whole lot. I just hire more drivers and get more trucks. Then hopefully I can slowly make more money. But if you want to be an owner operator, you can easily make $8,000 a month or more if you want to be an owner operator and get into the business. But you're going to be driving a truck for 11 hours a day. You're going to be working 14 hours a day, 5 days a week. So it's not an easy job. And as the owner operator, you have to do everything the owner is doing, and then you also have to drive the truck. So you're going to be probably pretty stressed out, but it's definitely doable. I mean, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people do it. But my goal and all of the lessons learned that I share are just from an owner's perspective. So whenever you're trying to choose a driver, this is the biggest headache probably for all business owners, not just in the trucking business, but just finding good, reliable employees is definitely a challenge. So luckily, I have a close relative who's driving for me right now. But in the very beginning, I had a driver whenever I was just starting out, and he was just wanting to do local runs. And we were kind of unclear as to Amazon or local deliveries, or he didn't want to go all across the country. So if you don't want to go what's called OTR, over the road, long haul, like from Pennsylvania to Oregon or Pennsylvania to Florida, Michigan to Louisiana, whatever. If you don't want to go over the road, you're not going to make as much money unless you find some sweet contracts, some local deliveries, in which case please share with everybody, because from my experience, from what I've seen, over the road drivers make significantly more money than the local drivers. And the way I kind of conceptualize it is you're going to spend a lot of time loading and unloading. So if you're just doing local deliveries, if you're loading and unloading every single day, I figured it takes about 2 hours to load and 2 hours to unload. So if you only have 11 hours to drive, but you're spending 2 hours to unload and 2 hours to load every single day, you just plain simple math, you're not going to be able to drive as many miles during the week as if you're only loading on Monday and then maybe unloading on Wednesday and then loading again on Wednesday and then unloading the following Monday, or even Friday. So if you cut out the daily loads and unloads by going over the road, you're going to drive more miles, which equates to making more money. But with all that being said, whenever you get started, make sure you and your driver, or just you and your family, whoever is involved with your business, just make sure that you are on the same page with whether or not you're going to drive locally, you're going to drive over the road. A lot of Amazon loads, almost all of the Amazon loads from what I've seen on their load board, are pretty much local deliveries. So it's like really nothing over 250 miles. But Amazon's not everywhere, especially the box truck loads for Amazon. So here in Central Pennsylvania, we have a bunch of Amazon warehouses. So before I got into the business, I thought we were good with Amazon loads, but it turns out they're only in Pittsburgh, and I don't even know if they're in Philadelphia. I think they're just in Pittsburgh and then further out on the east side of Pennsylvania. And here I am in Central Pennsylvania. I'm like 200 miles away from the closest box truck load. So if you're thinking about running strictly Amazon, try to get with someone who's already in the business running for Amazon and ask if you can look at their load board to see if Amazon even has loads for you in your local area, because if you're having to deadhead 250 miles just to get to an Amazon load, you're probably not going to make a whole lot of money. But Amazon's not the one and only source for box truck loads. I mean, Dat board and all the other load boards, they have a bunch of box truck loads. So don't rely solely on Amazon. You can find loads elsewhere. But huge importance and huge differentiation between OTR and local. So just decide what you want to do before you start, and make sure your drivers and your family and everyone involved is on board with what you want to do. Because if you're going OTR, you might be gone for a whole month. So that's a big commitment for everyone involved. Okay, truck inspection. So first of all, I am the type of person to just jump right into things, and I don't like waiting and analyzing, over analyzing, and spending too much time figuring out all the details. I just like to jump right into it and learn from my mistakes. And here I am, having learned from a lot of mistakes, $18,000 worth of mistakes. But the one thing I would recommend you do is get a mechanic to inspect the truck before you buy it. Don't rely on the seller of the truck to tell you, oh no, it's good, it just passed DOT inspection last week. Like, bring your own mechanic, even if you're going to spend $500 on a mechanic, which that's probably a little high. But even, if your mechanic charges $100 an hour, even if you're going to bring him out for 2 hours, pay the $200 to have your mechanic inspect the truck before you buy it. If you're about to buy a $40,000 truck, I think $200 is worth it to get a thorough inspection on the truck. If you know a lot about trucks, great. But if you don't know a lot about trucks, don't be afraid to spend a couple $100, even $500 to go inspect the truck before you buy it. Whenever I got my truck, I got it from Penske, and they're pretty reliable, pretty well-known company. And so I trusted them when they said that it just passed DOT inspection, but the tires were like 4/32 of an inch, like just barely hanging on. So as soon as I bought the truck, I ended up spending $1,000 right off the bat just to get new tires. So it's just little stuff like that just kind of, it'll slow you down in the beginning for sure, because you'll be spending time with the truck in the shop. But not only time, just also a lot of money up front. Before you've even made any money with the truck, you're going to be spending, a couple $1,000s to get it fixed so it can pass DOT inspection. So definitely bring a good mechanic with you, and then, try to make some connections with several other mechanics in your local area. I have a really good mobile mechanic who, if my truck breaks down, 30 minutes away from the mechanic, I don't have to pay to get it towed, so he can come out and take a look at it. Obviously, he can't do everything because he's just a mobile mechanic, but at the very least, he can come and maybe help me get it started so I could drive it to get it inspected or to get it fixed at the mechanic. Diesel mechanics, obviously way different than your regular mechanics. I've seen some diesel mechanics charge $150 an hour. The cheapest I've seen is like $80 an hour, which is awesome here for Central Pennsylvania. $80 an hour. The rates are climbing just like everything else. So I've seen some people go from 80 to 90. Now they're $100 an hour. So you're going to spend a lot in maintenance. I budget about $1,000 a month per truck for maintenance, and I think that's pretty reasonable from what I've seen so far. I got to get an oil change every single month, and tires every single year. So you're going to spend a lot on maintenance, so do a lot up front to make sure your truck is good before you bought it. And I added a point there, new or used. I bought a used truck. I bought a 2010 International 4300, and it's been driving great for me so far. Knock on wood, I haven't had any real major issues with it. I've had it for 3 months now. But moving forward, I think I'm only going to get new trucks. So I already purchased a truck. I'm going to get it in May, which it's quite some time away. It's like 6 months from the time that I'll actually have it, but it's going to be a brand new truck. And so my hope is that I'll spend less on maintenance, and so there'll be less downtime. I'll save money on maintenance, and also I'm hoping that my drivers are a little bit happier in a brand new truck. So I'll let you guys know in May how that new truck works out. But my hope is that I will save money in the long run. Obviously, it's a lot more expensive up front, but with a 6-year loan, the monthly payments are not terrible. So I am getting a new truck, and I will definitely let you guys know how that goes. But if you don't want to buy a new truck up front, just make sure you do your due diligence before you get started and have a good mechanic inspect it. Okay. This is the last point I wanted to make here, and I think I illustrate it pretty well on the screen here. I cannot stress this enough, and if you've been following along on my channel, I'm sorry if you hear me talk about it all the time, but this was seriously the biggest mistake that I made, and it almost made me give up and quit, but I did not. I persevered. Luckily, my dispatcher was pretty great, and he worked with me. And my driver was super reliable, and he was in it for the long run. So my driver didn't give up on me, but I cannot stress this enough. Get a 26-foot box. The width is pretty standard, like between 8.5 feet. 8 foot is pretty, you don't really need much wider than 8 feet because a pallet is 4 foot wide. So you can still fit 2 pallets side by side as long as your box is 8 feet wide. Taller the better, but chances are it's going to be at least 96 inches tall. But I mean, if you can get 102 inches tall, that's perfect. But there's nothing that's more important than a 26-foot length. And the reason for it, I don't know why, because I think my dispatcher told me up front that he could get me loads for an 18-foot box truck. So that's what I got first. And in July, I got an 18-foot box truck. And if you've been following along, you know that I just sold that box truck recently. I sold it for like a $2,000 loss, which wasn't terrible. But this was the reason I lost so much money, because I had an 18-foot box truck, and my dispatcher thought, no problem. I see loads all the time. They're like 2 or 3 pallets. And we do. Like, since running this 26-foot box truck, we have pulled loads, carried loads that were only, sometimes 1 pallet, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, but we could fit 8 pallets in our 18-foot box truck. So my dispatcher was thinking, sure, no problem. I can keep that running. I can keep that truck loaded because I see it all the time. And what would happen was, my dispatcher would go through the whole conversation, and then it would get to the point where he would say, oh, by the way, it's only an 18-foot truck. And they would say, oh, never mind. We need a 26-foot box. And he's like, well, why? It's only 1 pallet. He's like, yeah, sorry, the shipper needs a 26-foot box. Makes no sense. I don't understand. It just must be, I don't know, just like a blanket guideline from all brokers when it comes to running box truck freight. Like, they just require a 26-foot box. I don't understand it. My dispatcher has a lot of experience. He works almost exclusively with box trucks. So he has a lot of experience with box trucks. And I was even on the load boards myself, like trying to find loads. And I would find a load that was like 10 foot long, weighed 5,000 pounds. And I would call C.H. Robinson directly and be like, hey, can I pick up this load? He said, sorry, it needs to be on a 26-foot box. And I say, why? Like, it's only 10 foot long. It's only 5,000 pounds. It can fit in my box. He's like, yeah, sorry. The shipper says it's got to be on a 26-foot box. I don't know why. It doesn't make sense to me. But learn from my mistake. Don't do what I did. Don't try, I know it's hard to find a box truck right now. And even if you can't find a 26-foot box truck right now, just wait until one comes available. I wish I would have spent, $20,000 more on a 26-foot box truck back in July versus getting an 18-foot box truck. Because my dispatcher was able to, and this is the last point I'll make before I'll wrap it up here. My dispatcher was able to find me loads, but it wasn't consistent. So the biggest issue was, my driver would maybe deliver something in Tennessee, and then like a day would go by, 2 days would go by, and he wasn't driving. He wasn't making money. I wasn't making money. So he was just sitting there, obviously getting upset that he wasn't working, and my dispatcher just couldn't find anything. So he was able to find a load from Pennsylvania to Tennessee, no problem, but then he wasn't able to find something coming back. My driver got stuck in Florida, north part of Florida, like Orlando. So he wasn't down in Miami, nothing crazy like that. He was in Orlando, so he could have gone to Atlanta if he had to pick up something. But he was in Florida on Thursday. He dropped off Thursday morning, and he wanted to be home Friday night for the weekend to spend time with his family or whatever. And I figured, no problem. My dispatcher will easily be able to find something in 24 hours. And long story short, he couldn't find anything. So my driver, I told my driver, hey, just come home. There's nothing we can do about it. So he ended up deadheading all the way from Orlando to Pennsylvania. And that was the last load I did in my 18-foot box truck before I sold that truck and I got a 26-foot box truck. So that's the video, guys. I hope some of these mistakes and lessons learned were helpful. I know I usually show my QuickBooks, but I didn't do that this time. If you are new to the box truck business, I have a link in the description with a QuickBooks course. So if you guys have been following along, you know I work a lot with QuickBooks. So I have a link in the description for a QuickBooks course. It's $59. I highly recommend taking the course. I'll teach you everything you need to know from start to finish with your box truck business and how to do your bookkeeping and QuickBooks. So I appreciate you all watching my videos. I hope they're helpful. Like my videos, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this. I post every single Monday. I try to post at 2 p.m., sometimes a little bit later. But I will continue sharing my experience, and I'll keep sharing my lessons learned, my successes, and my failures. And I hope it's helpful to you all. So I appreciate you all watching, and I'll see you